Always feel like somebody's watching me, and I have no privacy. Oh, always feel like somebody's watching me. Maybe it is just a dream. Who's watching? Do 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 do. Tell me who's watching. Do 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 do. Who's watching? Who's watching you? Do 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 do.
Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Sunday, guys. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays and Fridays, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And what's going on, guys? Let's go ahead and do the damn thing. Got some interesting stories to discuss tonight. But first and foremost, I want to give a shout out to everyone who came out to help us yesterday for the food and clothing drive. Thank you guys so much. Here's a picture of us here, some of the peeps. So you'll see some of the people that came to help out. There's Rome. So yes, Rome was here in Boston. I know some people were really happy to meet him for the first time. There's Noel, Aisha, Zakia, and I think I just met him. I forgot his name, but I just met him. But this event took place in Roxbury, right next to the Marcus Garvey Recovery Center. I think we had a pretty good turnout, and you'll see the picture here. Here is the RBN Boston chapter banner that Charlie actually made. So you'll see there's Nick for Kansas City, JB for Orlando, CJ for Long Beach, and Rome for Detroit. This gentleman here, he's actually the gentleman that owns the Marcus Garvey Center. Oh, this other gentleman's name is AJ. Thank you so much for that, Eric. And there's me and Rome, and this woman here, she's actually a member of the community. So she stopped by, to tell us thank you so much for what you were doing. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you who donated. Huge shout out to Sergio, because you really did the damn thing. Sergio sent a lot of shampoo, conditioners, a lot of hygiene products, as well as non-perishable food items. Sergio sent a lot. So kudos. Thank you to all of you who donated food, clothing, medical supplies, etc. It was really great to be there. And it's always great when Rome comes to town. And the weather held up, so that made me really happy about that. But that was us right there on Malcolm X Boulevard. Thank you guys so much. We're going to be doing more things. We're heading into the holiday season. So that's our last event for this year. But coming next year, I know we got some other things that we want to do as well, and continuing to get the word out. And hopefully one day, the RBN chapters will have a permanent physical location where we can store a lot of these items and things like that, instead of in everyone's house. So, but thank you guys so much. I thought it was a good turnout. I thought we did a good thing. Okay. That being said, want to go ahead and give a shout out to everyone that is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. Big ups to you guys. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: ultimate, Sabinators, there's Sabsters, and of course, Sabbies. All of the names are listed here. And there's also members. Shout out to them as well. Thank you guys so much. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker as well. And are you guys ready to go ahead and jump in and do the damn thing? Because I am. I'm ready to go ahead and do it. It is finally, I guess, fall weather here in New England. We've been going back and forth. A couple of days ago, it got really warm. It was kind of weird. It was like all of a sudden 65 degrees. And I'm like, listen, I just put the winter, the summer clothes away. I'm not trying to go back. Not trying to go back. But now I think it is now officially that fall weather. So I had to wear a fall color. So I had to sport the orange. All right, let's go ahead and share that thumbnail. I want to go ahead and jump right in. Quite a bit to discuss today. What are we discussing tonight? I said today and tonight. People consider 5 o'clock day or night? Tonight, we are discussing Candace Owens and Norm Finkelstein chess move. At least that's what I call it. I consider this to be a chess move by Candace Owens. We're going to get into that. I'm also going to discuss Breaking Points debate, and this is over Israel and Palestine, whether or not this is considered to be ethnic cleansing. So we're going to talk about that discussion between Crystal and Sagar there. We're also going to discuss Mehdi Hasan claps back. Yikes. The gentleman in the picture next to Mehdi Hasan, he is the advisor to the Prime Minister of Israel. That was a heated discussion. If you have not seen it, you're going to see it tonight. So we're going to talk about that. And we're also going to discuss Michael Rapaport is big mad. I don't know if you know this guy. I'm familiar with him because he's an actor. So I've seen him in several movies. Haven't seen him in any new movies recently, to be honest with you, but he's been very loud and aggressive on Twitter and TikTok, and people are kind of getting tired of listening to Michael. And a couple of clips that I want to share that Michael has shared on Twitter that I think we need to talk about in reference to this issue with Israel and Palestine, because Michael is, Michael is making a lot of people upset, but Michael's also upset himself. So I said he was big mad. Okay. Big mad. Want to go ahead and give shout outs to Jonathan Williams for becoming a Sabby member. Shout out to Jonathan. Let's give him a big whoop, whoop. And I want to go ahead and give a shout out to Frank Johnson for the super chat. Hey, Sabby solidarity. Thank you so much, Frank. Thank you so much. Okay. Oh boy. Let's get started with this tense discussion between Mehdi Hasan and the Israeli advisor, Mark Regev, on the Israeli claims. Now, this is very interesting. Hold on to your seat. I thought this was pretty heated. I'm not like a fan of Mehdi Hasan, but I do think it was good that he pushed back the way that he did. And I think this is going to expose some things, what they are finally admitting here in reference to what happened on October 7th. Let's go ahead and get into this clip here.
Joining me now, Mark Regev, senior advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He was previously Israel's ambassador to the United Kingdom. Mark Regev, thanks so much for coming on the show today. Let's start with the tragic situation. Pleasure to have you on. Let's start with the tragic situation of the hostages. Hostage taking, a clear war crime by Hamas, and those hostages, of course, need to be released. Are we any closer to the release of any more hostages?
We surely hope so. Hamas, as you've reported, has kidnapped some 240 people. Unfortunately, today we found the body near the Shifa hospital of one of the hostages, a woman from Kibbutz Be'eri. Her name is Yehudit Weiss. She was 65 years old, a mother of 5. And so she's no longer a hostage. She was dead. The information we have is when she was taken into captivity, when she was abducted by Hamas, she was alive. We've now found her body. It was one of the results of the military operation today. Of course, getting the hostages out remains one of the focal points of our military operation. And we believe that by expediting the military pressure on Hamas, we're actually getting closer to the release of hostages.
Let's just pause here for a second, because something that I tend to notice with these discussions about the hostages is that you never hear them talk about the hostages on the other side, the Palestinian hostages that are being held hostage by the state of Israel. You never hear them talk about that. And so it's a one-sided perspective, but I do think Mehdi Hasan is going to push back quite a bit here. So let's go ahead and get into it.
So was it a mistake in hindsight, and that's tragic news to hear about this poor woman, was it a mistake for Prime Minister Netanyahu, your boss, to have reportedly turned down a deal at the start of this conflict that would have seen Hamas free women, the elderly, kids, in exchange for a 5-day ceasefire?
Okay. This part right here, Netanyahu, this is from The Guardian, Netanyahu rejected ceasefire for hostages deal in Gaza. So this was an opportunity that Netanyahu had where he actually could have made some type of deal, stop the fire, like have a ceasefire, and then those hostages would be released. Benjamin Netanyahu rejected that. And I believe he rejected that because his intent is to destroy Gaza, period. His intent is not to, let's try to make some type of negotiation. You got to understand, this guy is a psychopath. This guy is a maniac. This guy is far right wing. And for people who in the United States, they want to complain about Donald Trump, I want to remind you that Benjamin Netanyahu is to the right of Donald Trump. So just keep that in mind. This guy is insane. He does not want the Palestinian people there, period. He's talked about this before, this idea of a greater Israel, where the Palestinian people in Gaza are pushed out into Egypt, not allowed the right to return. There's several settlements in the West Bank that Israel is illegally occupying today. They are still removing Palestinian people from their homes in the West Bank today. So the greater Israel idea that Netanyahu wants to employ is to consume Gaza, is to consume the West Bank, and this extends into Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. So that is why he's not willing to make any type of deal for the hostages. So if you care about the hostages as much as you say that you do, you would have agreed to that deal to get the hostages back.
Free women, the elderly, kids, in exchange for a 5-day ceasefire. Isn't that why so many of the families of the hostages are angry with your government?
Sorry, Mehdi, that's just disinformation. There was not a real option for a deal before the ground operation. It was looked at seriously, but Hamas put nothing on the table that could be worked with. And so that's just not correct to say there was an option. We might have an option now for a deal. I can't tell you for sure. We might have an option because the military pressure on Hamas is maybe making Hamas understand that if they want a temporary ceasefire, they need to release hostages. Without that, we're not going to have a temporary ceasefire. So we're hitting Hamas hard, and maybe the military pressure will force them to consider how they look at the hostages. Look, we can't expect them to release hostages because they're suddenly going to become humanitarians, right?
Let me pause here for a second. I'm sorry, I disagree with that. I don't think it has to deal with the military pressure. I think it has to do with the fact that protests have erupted all across the world. These protests have continued for weeks since October 7th. There was a huge one on Friday in Chicago, Boston, DC, New York City, San Francisco shut down a bridge. They shut down the Boston Bridge, the one that goes to BU. They shut down the BU Bridge here in Boston. That's just in the United States, not to forget Texas, which also had a huge protest. And these have been going on for weeks. Internationally, protests have erupted in places like Jordan, and Indonesia had millions of people come out and protest. Ireland, Greece, France, countries that are allies of the United States. So I don't think it's just about the fact that they've been implementing military pressure on Hamas. I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that the world is watching. And when was the world watching before? The world was watching after George Floyd. The world was watching during the Vietnam War. So we have to think about these things. The pressure from the outside, when you have people come out in mass, it actually can be effective.
They're obviously not. They're brutal, vicious terrorists. And they'll only release hostages when they're forced to do so.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the military pressure. We are nearly 6 weeks into this bombing campaign and ground invasion. The Gaza Health Ministry says Israel has killed more than 11,000 people in Gaza, including a record number of children. Let me finish my question.
No.
Notice how he starts to interrupt Mehdi Hasan when he calls out the number of casualties of the Palestinian people. See, he doesn't want to hear that number. He's like, no. Let's not talk about anything bad that we've done.
But you can't say that. No, but you said you have to say the Hamas controlled Ministry of Health in Gaza.
I don't have to say what you asked me to say. More than 4,000 kids,
true.
They say.
That's true. You don't deny that? Mehdi, you don't deny that it's the Hamas controlled?
I'm not
denying
the
health ministry is controlled by Hamas.
Let me finish my question.
You can, but please tell the viewers the truth. That information is provided by Hamas.
So he doesn't really have to tell that to the viewers, because the thing is this. The viewers have seen the videos on social media, on TikTok, on Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it. We've seen the videos. So I don't really need to get a head count from another source when I can see the video footage in front of me. We see the casualties are way higher for the Palestinians. And that has been the case for years. And I'm going to show you a countdown of that throughout the years to show you the number of casualties, how they've been significantly worse for Palestinians than they have for the Israelis. You cannot deny that. So he doesn't want to admit that, because then that would make the state of Israel look bad.
Okay, and that information, we'll come back to that information, but you've got dead Gazans. The American government say maybe more than 11,000. You've got a record number of journalists killed, according to the CPJ, a record number of UN workers killed, according to the UN, and yet Hamas still exists. It's still capable of firing rockets into Israel, still has the hostages. You haven't found their big base under the Shifa hospital either. Your critics say that shows this war is a failure.
I would argue that's all incorrect, Mehdi.
How is it incorrect? You have killed over 11,000 people. You have not contained Hamas. They are still active. You have not retrieved the hostages. So if I had to declare whether or not Israel's actions have been successful or unsuccessful, based on the fact that they have not recovered the hostages, based on the fact that they have not been able to contain Hamas still, and they've killed over 11,000 Palestinian people, I would say that it has been unsuccessful.
We're hitting Hamas hard and they're feeling the pain. We just discussed that a moment ago. Why they may be now considering seriously a hostage release. It's not because, as I said, they've become humanitarians. It's because they're under a very, very massive military pressure. Look, this operation is not one that we wanted, obviously. This war was forced upon Israel in the terrible attack of October 7th, and we are fighting back, and we will destroy Hamas. We'll dismantle their military machine, and we'll take apart their political control of Gaza. That's good for Israel for obvious reasons. We don't have to live in fear of terrorists crossing the border and killing our people and butchering our children in the middle of the night. But it's ultimately also good, and I hope you agree with me, it'll be good for the people of Gaza, who deserve better than this terrible authoritarian, extreme Hamas regime.
There wouldn't even be, let me be very clear here, Hamas wouldn't even exist had it not been for the settlements, the occupation, and the imprisonment of the Palestinian people. They wouldn't even exist. Do people understand this? Gaza does not have an army. They don't have one. So it's just, these are the times when we have to go back and we have to look at history a little bit here. We would not have Hamas if it wasn't for the occupation, the land theft, pushing out of the Palestinian people, imprisoning them in Gaza, restricting their right to move. You wouldn't have it. It wouldn't have happened. Just like we would not have had ISIS had the US government not gone in and removed Saddam Hussein. This didn't start overnight. People didn't just wake up one day and said that they're going to go attack people in Israel. That's not how this happened. So him pretending to ignore history and pretend like the state of Israel is just innocent here, it's not only flawed, it's wrong.
the people of Gaza who are still alive. As I say, more than 11,000 people dead, reported dead, 4,000 children. I just want to pull up on the screen.
Hamas's numbers.
You say Hamas's numbers. I should point out, just pull up on the screen, in the last two major Gaza conflicts, 2009 and 2014, the Israeli military's death tolls matched Hamas's health ministry death toll. So, and the UN human rights groups all agree that those numbers are credible. But look, your wider point is true.
Can I challenge that? Will you allow me to challenge that, please? Can I just challenge that? I'd like to challenge that. I'll try to be as brief as you are, sir. Those numbers are provided by Hamas. There's no independent verification. And secondly, more importantly, you have no idea how many of them are Hamas terrorists, combatants, and how many are civilians. Hamas would have you believe that they're all civilians, that they're all children. And here we have to say something that isn't said enough.
First of all, the United Nations confirmed those numbers. He's ignoring that part.
Hamas, until now, we're destroying their military machine, and with that, we're eroding their control. But up until now, they've been in control of the Gaza Strip. And as a result, they control all the images coming out of Gaza. Have you seen one picture of a single dead Hamas terrorist in the fighting in Gaza? Not one. Is that by accident, or is that because Hamas can control the information?
You asked me a question and you
Gaza.
said you would be brief. I haven't, you're right, but I have seen lots of children with my own lying eyes being pulled from the rubble.
Because they're the pictures Hamas wants you to see.
Let me pause here for a second. Think about what he just said. Mehdi Hasan just said, I have seen a lot of pictures and images of children being pulled out from the rubble. The advisor here says, because those are the pictures that Hamas wants you to see. Are you not killing children? I mean, it's just like, are the pictures fake too now? This is something to think about. Think about what he just said, because that's what they want you to see. What does that have to do with the fact that you are killing children?
Exactly,
and also
my
because
point,
they're dead.
They're
Mark.
the pictures
also,
Hamas
but they're also people your government has killed. You accept that, right? You've killed children, or do you deny that?
No, I do not. I do not. I do not. First of all, you don't know how those people died, those children.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my God. See, this right here, this part right here kills me. Now he's trying to say that he doesn't accept that they have killed children. And he's saying you don't know how they died. We've seen the video footage. We've seen the pictures. This is absolutely appalling. So let me get this straight, ladies and gentlemen. We're not allowed to question. We're not allowed to question what the state of Israel was saying in reference to the casualties. We're not allowed to. Have you noticed that? We're not allowed to question it. And by the way, Mehdi Hasan is going to debunk something later on. But we're just supposed to believe what he says. We're just supposed to believe him. We're just supposed to believe what Netanyahu says. We're supposed to trust their numbers. We're supposed to trust their story and not question it. I mean, to me, it's beyond pathetic. This is terrible.
First of all, we don't want to see a single child killed.
Okay, here's my question for you, Mark. You say, I agree with you. I agree with you. We shouldn't blindly believe anything Hamas says. But why should we believe what your government says either? Your military spokesman on Monday pointed to an Arabic document in the basement of a Gaza hospital and claimed it was a Guardian list on which every terrorist writes his name. But that was false. It was just a calendar with the days of the week on it. Your colleague...
See this? So this is something that people actually... called out on Twitter, like people that were able to read Arabic. They said, yeah, that's actually a calendar with the days of the week on it. So Mehdi Hasan is calling this out.
In the Prime Minister's office, Ophir Gendelman posted behind-the-scenes footage from a Lebanese short film and claimed it was Palestinians in Gaza faking their own injuries. That tweet is still up a week later. That is endless disinformation from your government, is it not?
I disagree, and I think on the important issues, look, I'll give you an example, Mehdi. Originally, we estimated... No, I'm answering your question. Allow me to answer your question. I'm answering your question directly, if you'll allow me. We originally said in the atrocious Hamas attack on our people on October 7th, we had the number at 1,400 casualties. And now we've revised that down to 1,200 because we understood that we had overestimated. We made a mistake. There were actually bodies that were so badly burnt, we thought they were ours. In the end, apparently, they were Hamas terrorists.
let's pause here for just a second. You came back and you had to retract your statement because of the pressure from independent journalists there on the ground. That's why. That's why you had to come back and retract your statement. We're just supposed to sit here and pretend like that wasn't a calendar on the wall. We're just supposed, he hasn't addressed that, by the way. Notice he didn't acknowledge that that's a calendar, which means that they were lying. Once again, they were lying. So you see this flip-flop with the numbers. We talked about this before. 1 minute they said it was 1,400. Now they say it's 1,200. Here he is, the advisor to Netanyahu, and he is admitting on MSNBC that they were wrong about the casualties. He is admitting that some of those people were actually Hamas. And I would question how many of them were Hamas, but he's saying that some of those casualties that were reported as Israeli casualties were not all Israeli casualties. So to that point, we are supposed to not believe the journalist, the independent journalist that is reporting on the ground in Gaza. We're supposed to dismiss everything that they're saying, but we're supposed to trust all the information that is being reported by the IDF.
When we make a mistake, we admit it.
Short on time.
Why does that give you permission? Why does that give you permission to accept Hamas's numbers? I don't understand.
I didn't ask about Hamas numbers. I said to you that your military spokesman...
you were quoting to me before Hamas numbers, Mehdi. You were quoting to me Hamas's numbers.
Because the entire UN and the human rights community and the American intelligence community on Friday said they trust those numbers. But you're dodging my question, Mark.
I'm not sure that's true.
Why did your military spokesman on Monday point to a calendar in Arabic and say these are the names of terrorists on them? That's false. Can you accept that here and now?
I'm not aware of the incident.
Let's put up the image.
Oh, now all of a sudden when he's caught in a lie, when they're caught in a lie, all of a sudden now he's not aware of that information that was reported, but he's aware of everything else that has been reported. So Mehdi Hasan pulls it up.
The image. You have no
I can't read Arabic. It doesn't help me. I have no comment. I'm not familiar with the incident.
Does your spokesman read Arabic?
Hang on, I have a question, Mehdi. You're a journalist. Have you made a professional mistake ever? Not intentionally, but have you made a professional mistake?
Exactly.
But the numbers, but this information right here, this particular piece of information about this calendar was not reported by a journalist. It was first reported by a member of the IDF. The video is still on Twitter. You can go look it up. So he's trying to bring up the fact, well, Mehdi, aren't you a journalist? Haven't you ever made a mistake before? It wasn't initially reported by journalists. It was initially reported by the IDF, which goes to show you again that you cannot trust what is coming from the IDF, which is what a lot of us have been saying all along.
I own up to it.
Have you made a mistake? So can you
own up to the mistake?
So if I've made mistakes, you've made mistakes, but there's a difference between making an honest mistake and between Hamas that deliberately exaggerates numbers to suit its propaganda purposes. There's a huge difference.
So it sounds like
how do you honestly mistake a calendar? So here's the thing. Let's say that you cannot read Arabic. All right, cool. I'll accept that. So if you can't read Arabic, then how do you know what it says on that sheet of paper? Let's say that you can. So if you can read Arabic and you proceed to tell people that this is a list, the name of terrorists on the sheet of paper, and it's actually a calendar, is that a mistake or is that an intentional lie? That was an intentional lie for the IDF to be able to excuse the fact that they were targeting hospitals and that there were babies that died in those hospitals because they were pulled off the incubators. Other children died in those hospitals. The fact that Doctors Without Borders was actually complaining about the targets as well. Doctors Without Borders, for those who are not aware, these are typically doctors in the US, but they travel to practice elsewhere. They usually go to countries that don't have, a lot of medical facilities, or they don't have as many doctors. So I've seen Doctors Without Borders before, but you can't, the people see the writing on the wall. You cannot continue to sit up here and try to fool the American people. The thing is this, if you did not know how to read Arabic, then you didn't know what that sheet of paper said. So you still lied. If you knew how to read Arabic, then you knew what that sheet of paper said, and you still lied, okay? That's not a mistake. That's a lie.
Understood. So hold on. You said propaganda. Can we just deal with your colleague Ophir Gendelman's tweet? It's still up 7 days later. Why has it not come down? It's a Lebanese short film. We can put it on screen. It's not Palestinians faking their own injuries. Can we own up to that mistake and take that down? Is that not propaganda?
He's talking about this one right here. So this was actually called out by Community Notes. So someone posted, the Palestinians are fooling the international media and public opinion. Don't fall for it. See for yourselves how they fake injuries and evacuating injured civilians all in front of the cameras. Hollywood gets busted again. So it turns out, according to Community Notes, the video is the backstage of a short film, The Reality, shot in Lebanon by Lebanese actors to support the population of Gaza. Sometimes Community Notes does good work. Sometimes they don't. But that context there is very important. So Mehdi Hasan is asking him, are you not going to admit that this was false?
Once again, I understand that was also a mistake. And
so why is it still up 7 days later?
I'll speak to Ofer about it if you like. I'll speak to Ofer about it if you like. He's a friend of mine.
Okay.
It's still posted, though.
Colleague, I quite like him. He's a good man. He's actually very effective. Why is he effective?
Well, he speaks mother tongue level Arabic.
Mark, I agree. He made a mistake, but let's be clear. Let's be clear. It's very good that we have someone who can speak Arabic in the Arab networks directly to Arab people, so they can hear Israeli opinions directly.
Appreciate that.
Well, if that gentleman who posted that picture there also speaks Arabic, then you can also ask him about that calendar. No.
Is amazing at that. He's very important.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I know you're short on time, much more short than me, so I'm going to keep going. Let's talk about war crimes. Human rights groups, as well as the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, have accused Hamas of committing war crimes. But they've also accused Israel of war crimes in Gaza, too, which you blame on Hamas. So I have a simple question for you. If Hamas gunmen were hiding out in a school in Tel Aviv or an apartment block in Haifa, would you be okay with the Israeli Air Force dropping bombs on those buildings, leveling them, killing the innocent Israelis inside in order to get the Hamas gunmen? Would you do that?
That right there, I will say, is a brilliant question by Mehdi Hasan. Mehdi isn't always on point, and I don't always agree with him. But that question right there, listen to what he says.
But you're right in your question. Of course, Hamas hides behind students and children. That's their whole policy. That's why we've had the casualties we've had. Hamas deliberately embeds itself, as you said in your question, amongst civilians. The fact that they buried themselves under the Shifa hospital in Gaza City, not one hospital, but a whole series of hospitals. They
Mark,
took
with respect,
over
you're not answering my question.
If you know that they're underneath the hospital, why haven't you gone underneath the hospital? If you know that they're multiple times we've heard this, that they're in the tunnels, why haven't you gone into the tunnels? You see, they honestly make themselves look bad. Other people don't have to try to make them look bad. The government, the state of Israel, is making themselves look bad by the things that they admit during these interviews.
Military installations.
Would you bomb?
I am answering your question.
Would you bomb schools and houses in Israel if Hamas militants were believed to be under them and kill Israeli human shields in the process?
We don't deliberately kill anyone. That's not a fair question. What we are trying to do is eliminate this threat.
Okay, would you accidentally kill Israeli human shields? I'm asking you a very simple question.
We wouldn't want to accidentally kill anyone. We wouldn't accidentally. No, we wouldn't accidentally want to kill anyone.
Understood.
But can I tell you, when the West fought ISIS, when the West fought ISIS in Fallujah and in Mosul, also there ISIS used human shields. They actually used a hospital, I believe, in Mosul. You probably know this as well as I do.
I do. And
the West was fought. And the West was fought. But I think it's actually.
And it was wrong. So don't try to point to what the West did and say, oh, well, the West did it, so we can do it too. It was wrong. People spoke out about that back then. People spoke out about that. People like also Julian Assange revealed U.S. war crimes. That's why Julian Assange is in prison. People have spoken out against it. So don't point to the United States and say, well, the U.S. did this, the West did this. We're not the best example to use. We are not the best example to use.
I think America did the right thing. You had to defeat these brutal terrorists.
Would you apply the
but you're
tactics
saying
of
to
Gaza
me
in Israel? It's a simple question.
We wouldn't allow them. We wouldn't allow them to take over a school in the first place. We'd send in special forces and we'd take out the terrorists.
I know you're over on. You're out of time.
I did answer your question. Why did you say I didn't answer your question? You didn't answer. I didn't answer it the way. I didn't answer it in the way you wanted me to answer it. That's the problem. I didn't answer it the way you wanted me to answer it. We would send in special forces. And we would neutralize the terrorists. That's what we've done in the past. You know we've done it that way. Yes.
So they would send in special forces, right? So why aren't they, and this is something that other politicians have admitted as well, why aren't they isolating it? Why aren't they, if you know that they are in the tunnels, why didn't you go into the tunnels? I'm seeing them go after refugee camps, multiple hospitals. And now we'll get to this when we get to the Crystal and Sagar story, because another thing that they go into is the fact that they told the Palestinian citizens to move south, but now they're coming for the south too, which is what I told you they would do. So where are those people supposed to go? They can't go back north. They can't stay in the south. They can't go over into Egypt, and they shouldn't have to go over into Egypt. This is exactly what Netanyahu wants. He wants them pushed out. Lock the borders and don't let them come back in.
Last question for you. You've got ministers in your government. I have to ask this question. Amichai Eliyahu, who said Israel should consider dropping a nuclear bomb on Gaza, which would kill over 2 million people. He's still in your government. Avi Dichter, another member of your government, went on TV and said this is Gaza Nakba 2023. And your boss, Benjamin Netanyahu, invoked Amalek, which was a biblical call for killing every man, woman and child. Mark, do you understand why that cannot be heard as anything other than calls for genocide or ethnic cleansing around the world?
So will you allow me to answer?
Of course.
Number one, that minister was reprimanded by the Prime Minister, Eliyahu, and he was told very forthrightly he's suspended from the government, and if he makes any statements like that again, he's fired. On the
doesn't matter, it's too late. He went on national television and made that statement, and the word is already out. And by the way, I don't think he would have felt comfortable making that statement unless he knew that that was exactly how his boss felt as well.
Avi Dichter, I think I actually agree with what he said. The Nakba, the tragedy that was brought upon the Palestinians in 1947-48 was because of an extreme irresponsible leadership that wasn't willing to compromise. And Hamas is doing the same thing to Palestinians in Gaza. Terrible. And if they are creating a catastrophe, it's because of Hamas. And on the third point, Amalek was known in Jewish history, and I'm sure you know this, that they attacked from behind. They killed the women and the children and the people who were sick, who couldn't walk quickly. That's why Amalek is in the Bible, is so condemned, because they attacked the innocent. No, I know my. Don't tell me I don't know my Jewish history. I know my Jewish history.
Go and attack the Amalekites. Do not spare them. Put to death men, women, and children. Is that what you're doing in Gaza? That's what the Prime Minister invoked.
No. He was describing. First of all, no one in Israel is calling for women and children to be killed on the contrary. How can you?
Well, your heritage minister did. Really, he said nuke Gaza.
No. What we have said is we're going to wipe out Hamas, and we are going to wipe out Hamas. But we.
No, I'm sorry. I saw part of that interview. That is not what that guy said. He did not say he was going to wipe out Hamas. He said all of them. All of them.
Make a clear distinction between Hamas and the Palestinian civilians of the Gaza Strip, who are in many ways Hamas oppresses them. Hamas might want to kill Israelis, but the way Hamas treats the civilian population of Gaza, I'm sure you yourself will admit that they deserve better than that terrible Hamas terrorist regime.
I will admit that they deserve better than what the state of Israel is doing to them. How can you sit up there and call out another group for oppression when you have physically taken these people off of their land? You took their homes. You put them in an open air prison. You control the resources. You decide what foods go into Gaza. You decide who gets to leave Gaza if they have to go to the hospital to have surgery. You decide who gets that permit to be able to go. And there have been a number of people that have been refused, by the way. So how dare he sit up here and talk about another group oppressing another group, and you are the one in power. Your government is the one that's making these decisions. Your government is the one that pushed people off their land, that took their homes. Your government is the one that controls the resources, the land, the air, and the sea. You have no room to talk about anybody oppressing anyone else. because we have to think about what's real here. The nerve, the gall of him to say that.
But on that note, we're out of time. Well, I'll give you one very straightforward last yes or no question for you. That Joe Biden wants a two-state solution in the Middle East. He wants it sooner rather than later, he says, to get peace in the Middle East. Does your government, does Prime Minister Netanyahu support a two-state solution? Yes or no?
I think it's a time now for war. It's a time for victory. And when that's over, with Hamas defeated, with Hamas destroyed, when you've taken out the most extreme enemy of peace, that'll create room, I think, for more moderate and pragmatic voices to fill the vacuum, and that'll be good for peace.
Okay, I call BS on that because Netanyahu has had several years to pursue a two-state solution, and he has chosen not to. So I don't believe what he's saying in reference to that. I think this is BS. I think they don't want a two-state solution. Netanyahu has advertised the Greater Israel Plan multiple times. Look, the writing is on the wall, people. And, kudos to Mehdi Hasan for pushing back on him, because this guy is just blatantly lying. And it's gotten to the point that, again, because of all the protests, mainstream media had to push back. You have to talk about the other side now. Thank you for the super chat, Penny. IDF helicopters shot missiles at cars at festival. Yeah, I saw an article about that as well. I saw the video too, but I can't play the video on here. Thank you for the super chat, 007 Angelo. If only the USA Doctors Without Borders visit the USA. I know, I was thinking the same thing. JB says, Sabs, is this the reason why they took the Muslim hosts off the main anchor chair of MSNBC initially, because they could dismantle Israeli arguments? That is what I believe. I think that's why they had removed Mehdi Hasan and I forget the other gentleman's name. I think that's why they removed him, because they knew that they could talk about the other side, the other perspective. And thank you for the super chat, Raphael. Happy Sunday to our outstanding North Shore sister. Happy Sunday, Raphael. All right. Now we're going to go into another debate. So Breaking Points actually debated this issue of whether or not they consider what Israel is doing ethnic cleansing in Gaza. I have two clips that I want to show you. The first one is about the ethnic cleansing issue. The other one is about the protests. And I got to tell you, some of the takes from Sagar are really cringe. I don't know if he's just uninformed or if he is informed, but he feels like he can't side with us on this issue because then he would be siding with the left. I don't know what it is, but there are a couple of things that are said here that I think really do need to be discussed. And at this point in time, like I said before, Benjamin Netanyahu has revealed this idea of a greater Israel multiple times. So I don't have to sit back and ask the question, I wonder if it's actually ethnic cleansing. No, I don't have to think about that. I don't have to ask that. There was one point in time, I don't know if everyone remembers this, but one point in time, if you look at the history, when the Nazi Party first started, at one point in time, people denied what was happening to Jewish people. People were denying it. They were like, oh, no, these things aren't really happening. They're not trying to exterminate a whole population of people. So we always have to go back to history. So we're going to go into this clip here of Breaking Points where they debate this very issue. Is it ethnic cleansing? Listen to this.
Spokesperson, based on the plans that were leaked strategically from an official Israeli government ministry that said, no, what our ideal situation is we push everybody, displace everyone from the north, then we push everybody out of the south, and we basically force Egypt and other Arab nations to take in this Palestinian population. This is something that members of the Netanyahu coalition have wanted for quite some time and have been openly advocating for really for years. So it shouldn't be any surprise that this is the goal. that the goal is complete ethnic cleansing of the Gaza Strip. And there were reports about how pressure is being put on Egypt to use their considerable debt load to try to pressure them into this. There were also reports that there's pressure being put on the U.S. to take in Palestinian refugees as well. But, to me, it's very clear what the goal is. The only question is whether they'll really be able to accomplish this goal. But I just think it's important to keep in mind, where.
So notice what Crystal just said there. She said, it's very clear to me what the goal is. So Crystal gets this. Okay, Crystal gets this. We have to remember those leaked documents from the Israeli government where they explain very explicitly what their plan was. And I don't know what else needs to happen. I don't know if it's going to take like more Israeli state officials coming forward on interviews, making this plain as can be. I don't know what else needs to be said for people to get this through their head, what the goal is. Of course, if somebody like Netanyahu's being interviewed, of course, he's not going to be like, oh, yes, we're going to ethnically cleanse. Of course, he's not going to say it that way. He's not stupid.
We already are in this conflict, which is for Gaza City was incredibly densely populated. This is where the majority of the population of Gaza lived, and it's gone. 45% of all homes within all of the Gaza Strip, not just in Gaza City, have already been damaged or destroyed. The millions who have been displaced from their homes, there's nothing for them to go back to in Gaza City. That's already where we are. So, are they degrading Hamas capabilities? I don't know. We haven't really seen much evidence of that.
House, yeah.
But we haven't seen much evidence of really going directly and targeting the military infrastructure. And then there's also the question that Elon Musk asked and that the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff asked as well, which is how many new Hamas members are you creating with these actions, which is part of, the lesson we should have taken from our actions in responding to 9/11. So for me, it's not really a mystery what their goals are, what their approach is. You can see it in what they're telling, their own population, what they're saying publicly, and the military actions that are unfolding on the ground.
Well, is that the goal of the Israeli far right? Yeah. Is it the overall goal of the Israeli military? I don't know. Like I said,
that doesn't make any sense, Sagar. So what Sagar says there doesn't make any sense. He's like, is that the goal of the Israeli government? Yes. Is that the goal of the Israeli military? I don't know. Who does the Israeli military work for? They work for the Israeli government. Of course, that is their goal. How many IDF soldiers need to be interviewed who have stated it very plainly what their goal is for Sagar to get that they want the same things? It's like, it would be like someone saying the U.S. government has this goal, but I don't know if the U.S. military has that same goal. They go hand in hand.
The Israeli military is just doing what they are told.
Well, the quote you read, I actually think was quite accurate, is that they're going for damage, not accuracy. But that's kind of what I'm saying, is that they're basically willing to pull the trigger on a 15, 20% chance. That's just not something the way most Western militaries would act. That's a different thing, though, than a targeted, we're going to blow as much civilians up as possible. I don't really think that's what they're doing. I think it's more in terms of they just don't care as much about collateral damage. But there's an important difference between those two things.
So this is another thing I push back on. I don't understand how Sagar can say that, because anyone who has looked at the history, what has happened to the Palestinian people, what he has to understand is, and especially now, because they do have a far right government, what he has to understand is that they do not care about these people. They do not care about the Palestinian people. I have sat back and I've watched so many documentaries and a number of videos, and I have watched people like Netanyahu refer to the Palestinian people, not Hamas, by the way, refer to the Palestinian people the same way that white people have referred to black people in this country: animals, savages. It's just, what else more does Sagar needs to see to be convinced that they do not want them there? If they wanted them there, they wouldn't have kicked them off their land and took their homes. It's just, I don't know. It's like when Europeans came to the United States, which was North America at that point in time, when they came to North America, slaughtered the indigenous people, And the ones who were alive, eventually along the way, it's like, let's just put them on reservations. What do you think those people, the colonizers who came to North America, were like, well, yeah, we want them to coexist? No, they didn't. They didn't. That's part of the reason why the indigenous population in this country is so low now, because they tried to kill all of them.
At what point do we go beyond quote unquote collateral damage when somewhere around 90% of the deaths are civilian? Mm-hmm. At what point does, listen, people can lie about their intent, but the numbers don't lie. 40% of the deaths are children. So at what point do you say, like, this isn't collateral damage? This is part of the goal of the operation as evidenced by what has unfolded thus far.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though, is that they just don't care about that number, and they would care and point to the one figure. I'm not justifying this. I'm only saying that the intent matters, and what it all looks like, it eventually is. So I don't know
that the intent does matter at a certain point when you have this level of civilian death and targeting of civilian infrastructure.
The intent matters in terms of whether they're going to, what the goal is and how what they're willing to. So let's say that their red line was ethnic cleansing. They're like, this is our full-blown goal. Then that's not what you would do. You would do something different. Now, it can be a secondary goal. It could be one of those things that it would be nice. It would fulfill some political, objective. But that's not the way you would conduct that. Is what they did in between Azerbaijan and Armenia. That's what an actual full-blown ethnic cleansing was going to look like.
First of all, there are different ways to cleanse an area. And I'll give you an example with the United States. When we talk about like gentrification, which is happening in a lot of cities all across this country, it's like the developers that come into low-income neighborhoods and they build these high-rise luxury apartments and condos. It's not like they go to the city and speak to the mayor and say, I want to get rid of all the poor people. It's not like they make that statement. It's, I want to bring this new development to the area, and it's going to bring a lot of money into the neighborhood, which is going to be good for the economy, which is going to be good for the city. But what happens over time? The people that were already there get displaced. Those people are pushed out because when you bring in more expensive apartments and condos, that is going to bring in a certain segment of the population, those that can afford to pay for those condos. Then what happens? Then there's pressure on the landlords to increase the rent for the people who actually grew up in those neighborhoods, because the property taxes increase, everything else is going to increase in that area. This is why some neighborhoods refuse till this day to allow a Whole Foods to come to their neighborhood, because they know what's going to happen. So the people who grew up there end up being pushed further away and further away. You can see this if you come to Boston, by the way. Come to Boston and you'll see it. You think I'm going to the North End. It's the Italian neighborhood. No Italians live there. They all been pushed out. There's Italian restaurants that some of those families that used to live there may still own, but they don't live there anymore. They've been pushed up to the North Shore. Most of them that grew up in the North End. Same thing, Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan. It's happening all across. A lot of the African Americans that grew up in those neighborhoods, a lot of them have been pushed to the South Shore. So they're in Randolph. So there are different ways to rid certain people of an area. But the point is, I think what Sagar has to understand is that it's not going to be as overt all the time. But the point that I want to make in reference to Israel, though, Netanyahu has been very clear. He's been very clear that they don't want them there.
Laid out exactly what the goal was, and they have the phase by phase process. First, move people out of the north, then put pressure on the south.
Well, this is a secret plan. We don't know if it's been.
That's exactly what is unfolded thus far. Then you put off the table any other solution. So, for example, the U.S., which there's a lot of problems with this idea too. It's like, hey, let's have the Palestinian Authority run the Gaza Strip afterwards. No, that's not going to work for us. Which is no surprise because number one, I think Palestinian Authority probably isn't up to the task. But number two, they don't want unity between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And then when you couple what what's already unfolding in Gaza with what's being done in the West Bank with settlers being turned loose and basically running wild, massacring Palestinians there as well and pushing them off their land too. It's very hard for me not to look at the facts as they're unfolding and say, yeah, this is the goal. This is the plan that is unfolding. This is what they're pushing towards. And the only question is whether anyone's going to stand in their way.
Well, I think you think that because you have a very, look, I think that you're coming at it from a place of zero trust from Israel. I wouldn't say I have zero. Let's call it, I don't know. I have a neutral trust of both Hamas and of Israel. We're not willing to assume the worst.
Did you guys see what he just did? He said he has a neutral trust of both Hamas and Israel. Why didn't he say the Palestinians and the Israelis? See, again, we have to be very careful about describing the Palestinian civilians as Hamas because they're not. So we can't just sit up here and overstate that for the entire population of Palestinian people. Imagine if somebody did that to us in the United States. Imagine if someone said, oh my God, in the United States, they have white supremacist organizations. Is that all of us? No. So you have to be careful. Notice what he did there, though. And I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but I think this is becoming a habit for some people. When they talk about the Israelis, they say the Israelis. But when they start to talk about the Palestinian people, they say Hamas.
Of really anyone except for the Hamas terrorists, but specifically not the PA. So ethnic cleansing or genocide is one where you have an explicit aim of wiping out this entire race or pushing them out of the region. Now, is that existing in a document, which we covered here on the show? Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Is that the official plan? I don't know. There are all kinds of
Thank you for this, Adis. Netanyahu in September showed a map for the future in which Palestine did not exist. Exactly. So Sagar is admitting that they covered that leaked document on Breaking Points. He said, yes, this was mentioned in the leaked document. Is that the plan? I don't know. What more do you need? What more do you need for that to convince you that this is the ultimate goal?
Secret plans inside the Pentagon. There were plans inside the Pentagon to break Iraq into three parts. There was actually very serious considered at one point pushed by Vice President Joe Biden. Does that mean it was the actual plan of the U.S. government? Not really. I actually don't think there is a plan. I think there are disparate elements within the Israeli government, some of whom want ethnic cleansing, some of them who have no problem with collateral damage, some of whom are probably much more Western aligned and are ashamed of the way that the entire operation goes. And this is like what the consensus view is. So that seems to me like it's much more like of a cluster rather than any explicit aim. Now, that doesn't justify what all of the deaths are, but it comes to how are we going to, as the United States, the international community, Israel, all of this, what does this all end up look like? I think it probably ends whenever the international community just rug pulls its support. There will be no, final determination on Hamas. There will just be a high death toll. There will be now a huge squabble over internal security, indefinite, and all of that. And I think it's more, in my opinion, is more terrifying that there isn't a plan, that there isn't a consensus plan. So I don't think that there is a plan.
You're right. I don't trust Israel, but actually in this, I'm taking them at their word. When you have security minister, security cabinet member, and minister Avi Dichter of the Likud party, Netanyahu's party, announcing the plan for residents of Gaza is Gaza Nakba 2023. That's how it'll end. When you have Bezalel Smotrich calling for the, quote, voluntary migration of Gaza Arabs to the countries of the world. When you have Netanyahu himself comparing Palestinians to the biblical foe of the Jewish people, Amalek, who they are called to destroy, including women and children. I'm taking them at their word of what they actually want to do here, and as evidenced by their actions thus far, which are entirely consistent with pushing the population out of Gaza entirely. Now, again, does that mean they will succeed? Not necessarily. It depends on whether the U.S. decides that we are going to, accept this quote unquote final solution, and I do use those words very intentionally, of the population in the Gaza Strip, or whether we are going to step in and use the considerable leverage that we have. But I'm just looking at their actual statements and their actions on the ground.
Yeah, I agree, Crystal. But the person that you read is a freaking agricultural. That's like saying Tom Vilsack's opinion on Israel matters. Like, who is
He's a member of the security cabinet.
Yes, but I mean, technically, Tom Vilsack is a member of the U.S. cabinet.
Well,
so
do you want to take,
I can say
the president of Israel saying there are no innocent civilians?
Yes, that's much more important.
You want to take Netanyahu himself, again, comparing them to Amalek, the historical foe of the Jewish people, and calling for them to be completely wiped out, including women, children, and infants.
So I agree. I think that the president of Israel, who, by the way, is the head of state and actually has no power, but that's a secondary thing. It's still important for the head of state for what the statements and all that. His statements, Netanyahu's statements, and the security ministers or the defense minister statements are the single most important. We would recognize that in the U.S. system. Now, none of them have said anything like that. That said,
So I'm sorry, Sagar is way off here. Again, I don't know how many times I need to show this video. But Netanyahu has made this very clear, the plan for Israel. It does not include Gaza. He's talked about this multiple times, the Greater Israel Plan, which will include southern part of Lebanon, parts of Syria, which is also, we have to point this out, Israel is also bombing Lebanon and Syria, guys. So again, I feel like either Sagar is just uninformed, or he does know more about this, but he doesn't want to agree with it because, again, like I said, the purpose of this show was to have someone, it's a populist show, right? So to have like the left populist perspective and the right populist perspective, but coming together on some of those core issues. So the thing is, if he were to flip to that side, then he's agreeing with the left. So I don't know what this is about, but I don't know how many times we have to show that video to show what the plan is. Let me go ahead and put this here. Sorry, my mouse. I'm looking at two different mouses.
It doesn't mean it's not problematic and that there isn't any real like internal policing going on. So I'm just saying, I think we should all be super reluctant to just throw these terms out there. When you can have terrible net effects, but actual intent matters a lot in terms of how things are going to end up. And I think people are probably reading this as like covering for the Israelis. Again, the effect matters the most to the families and the people who are dead.
Right.
That's actually what matters the most.
Correct.
However, from an international relations and geopolitics perspective, what their intent is and how we can actually shape the situation to our benefit and not what their real aims are, that matters in terms of how we lessen the security implications on us and also what they want, what their future is. Netanyahu is not going to be there forever. So if that was the explicit aim, is that the official aim of the entire Israeli security cabinet? Is that the aim of what the general consensus is of the Israeli population? I genuinely would say no. And so I think part of the issue is that you have a lot of disparate coalitions inside Israel right now. They had to have most of them don't even know what they want. Even the hostage thing. I mean, hostages really remains like the single uniting thing probably within Israeli society. Well, I would say then it's like, well, what actions are actually being taken to release the hostages? I always find that a bit odd in terms of the discourse because it's like.
I just want to pause here for a second. Did you guys notice that he said what's in our benefit? Like basically what's in the benefit for the U.S. government, right? What's the benefit for the U.S. government? So I have this question. Why are we trying to make this about us? What this situation that is happening in the Middle East, this is between the state of Israel and Gaza. The way that Sagar put it almost seemed as though he's trying to see how the U.S. can benefit. So if that is the case, then that means that once again, we have not fully broken away from this idea of U.S. intervention. Because I've said this before, why should the U.S. government or this country, why should we still have these invested interests in other countries? We need to stop sending arms to Israel. We need to stop sending over $8.3 billion a year to Israel and let these countries govern themselves. So we don't really need to think about the U.S. benefit. Like, what is this?
Some things are very incongruent with releasing hostages or not, ceasefire deals, diplomacy, etc. When that falls apart, now what? So I think we're in the worst situation. I think it's very much like Iraq. There were a lot of different people who wanted to invade Iraq for various different reasons: democracy promotion, security, all kinds of other nonsense profits, on cases. And what ended up happening is that because there was no real overall security aim with that, the day after it became a cluster, and we ended up staying there for 20 years. I think very likely that's the same scenario that's going to happen for Israel, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the overall intent. That doesn't also mean that it's not horrible to be Palestinian and to live into Gaza right now.
So even if you want to say that it's unclear,
yes,
what the intent is at this point, it's too late. By the time it's already happened, and you say like, oh, I guess they really did want to do the ethnic cleansing that they've been telling us all this time that they wanted to do, then it's too late. That's why it's important to look at the words and the actions that are being taken now. And again, Sagar, you already have about 2 million people who are displaced in Gaza.
But at least they're alive.
Displaced
That's I'm happy they're alive.
And 90% roughly civilian casualty toll. You already have Palestinians being aggressively pushed off of their land in the West Bank, aided and abetted by the IDF. So, I think part of this is thinking clearly about what has this government said in the past they want to do. What are the plans that they have, strategically leaked to the public? What are their comments now? And what are the actions that we see? Unless we want to, look back and say, whoops, we aided and abetted an ethnic cleansing, didn't really mean to, thought they intended something different. I guess it's too late now.
Yeah, look, I think that the dangers of it being ethnic cleansing are very real. I think it's very possible also within the current security cabinet. But for now, 2 million of them are alive. We have a chance, I think, in order to try and draw the operation to a close, have some sort of security thing, which the Israelis can accept, and then get the hostages out and actually move to a situation where these people can, at the very least, return, to where they were from, and with the international support and hopefully Israel paying the bill, not America, they can actually stay, and then possibly we can all move forward. Now, that's what I would like to see.
I really do feel like Sagar is trying to walk in the middle with this, and I don't think that you can. I don't know who he's trying to pander to here in this discussion. It's like, I want to remind everyone once again, if we go back to the Holocaust, for example, I want to remind you that for the longest time, when Hitler made it very clear what his intent was, what he wanted to do, Sagar can choose not to call this intent if he doesn't want to, but I'm going to call it intent. He made it very clear what he wanted to do. For the longest time, people refused to admit it. They were denying it. That is part of the reason why it went on for as long as it did. By the time World War II came in and the US government and other countries got involved, how many Jewish people were killed by that point in time? The point that I'm making is if people would have been paying attention to what he was saying from the get-go, they would have known what was coming. And I feel like Sagar's just trying to play it safe.
Whether the Israelis want to see that, I don't think so. Whether Hamas actually wants that either, it's not like this hasn't been a very beneficial situation to them. I think that's very, very much true. The Arab world and the international community, I think that we're much nearer to a deciding point away from the current situation than we were before. And I think that could be a beneficial direction that we would move in, especially with whatever happens with this hospital. That's really what I think.
He keeps saying we, though. Notice he keeps saying we because he's still talking about the American government's role in this.
200, at least, residents of Gaza, Palestinians in Gaza, have already been killed. And I don't know if we're still doing like the 9/11 math.
No, we need to put a total and complete shutdown on
I don't have any
math.
idea how many 9/11s that equates to, but I just want people to sit and think what that would mean. 1 in 200 residents of the Gaza Strip have already been killed. That's where we're at in this operation right now.
So I think that would be, my back of the napkin math is a couple 100,000 Americans, but I'm not 100% sure. Again, though, I am calling for a shutdown on all
9/11 math.
Okay, so there's another part to this that I want you to see where he gets into the piece about the protest. Oh dear, I'm gonna swap this for just a second. Shout out to neoliberteers for capturing this part. Sagar on peace protest. It just seems crazy to me. I mean, once again, you're not Palestinian. Listen to this, guys. Oh, listen to the doozy badoozy.
I think these people are pretty predictable. You can whip them up. Sure, they'll say this about, but at the end of the day, like if you think Trump is literally Hitler, which a lot of them do, then they're probably going to vote for Biden.
I think you're underestimating what a searing event this is for a lot of young people, in the same way that the Iraq War was a searing event for a generation. I think.
Let me just pause here for a second. There's something that I want to add in reference to the Iraq War. Not even just the Iraq War, the Vietnam War. I just want to remind everyone the numbers of people that protested against the Vietnam War. And it wasn't just in the United States, by the way. Think about all the people who protested against the Vietnam War. Think about like the soldiers that came back from the Vietnam War, where some of them were respected and some of them were not respected. Some of them were called baby killers when they came back to the United States. I want you to think about that. So I know some people are saying, well, this is just a generational thing. This is like the Gen Z kids who are out there protesting. I've been to multiple protests in reference to this issue with Israel and Gaza, and I've seen people of all ages. I've seen whole families, like people with their kids. I saw a kid in the stroller. I've seen older people out there protesting. Yes, some of the younger people may be leading it, but it's not just the Gen Z folks that are protesting this. And sorry, this is so small. It's on neoliberals' Twitter like that. I don't know why it's so small like that on the Twitter, but it is.
I think it is at that level of like absolute horror that our government could be involved in such a thing, horror that such a thing was even on the table, and whether or not you agree with that perspective. I think it goes a lot deeper than just like a flash in the pan concern of the moment. And you see that by, you know, the widespread protests across the country. You see it by the energy on social media. It's hard to quantify these things, but it is my sense that this cuts a little deeper than some of the other things. It's not a flash in the pan. This is genuinely like this generation's Iraq War moment.
I don't know. I mean, it just seems crazy to me. Once again, I mean, you're not Palestinian, and it's.
Pause. So Sagar says it seems crazy to him because you're not Palestinian. There is something called solidarity. And solidarity is when you put someone else's needs before your own. Maybe Sagar is not aware of how to put someone else's needs before his own. So he doesn't think that you should be out there because you're not Palestinian. First of all, the marches that I've been to, there have been Palestinian Americans at those protests. There are Palestinian Americans here in the United States that have family members still in Gaza, FYI. 2, what would Sagar say to all of the white activists that protested during the civil rights march? What would he have said? And that includes people like Bernie Sanders, by the way, because he also was out there. Think about that. You know, one of the reasons why, one of the things that made the civil rights movement as large as it became is because it wasn't just Black people out there fighting. Apparently, I guess that wouldn't have been okay in his mind. During the George Floyd protests, it wasn't just Black people out there protesting. There were several white comrades. There were Palestinian comrades out there protesting with us. But according to Sagar, I guess he thinks you should only fight for your own people. This is very concerning. And this is what I'll get into in a second, because I have something to say about where I feel that Bernie Sanders movement failed. Let's continue.
Like, in America, we were involved in the Iraq War. Our soldiers are the one who are dying. Like, the idea to me that you're going to get all that spun up about at the end of the day, which is the conflict which has no effect on you literally whatsoever, it just seems kind of nuts to me. But the other thing is
that has no effect on you whatsoever. So as I said earlier, there were Palestinian Americans who were at those protests that have family members abroad in Gaza. 2, this goes back to what I've said before about the fact that a lot of people in this country are not willing to actually speak on something or stand up against something unless they are affected directly. That is one of the biggest flaws about the USA, where it is more independent here. That's why we have a lack of community in this country, because everybody is looking out for their self. One of the biggest flaws about the United States is the fact that there does seem to be this lack of solidarity, this fact that if something doesn't affect you directly, then you shouldn't care about it. That is selfishness, And that is part of the reason why we struggle to have some type of community in this country, where once upon a time there was more of such a thing.
Generation divide.
Deeply out of touch, deeply out of touch. And so this piece right here, also from neoliberteers, just to add on to this as well, where they bring up the issue with the Iraq war again. I want you to hear this part of it.
For me, it's like, it can't be Iraq war when it's not your own citizens who are the ones doing the fighting and the dying.
But it is
then it's a foreign conflict.
But it is our taxpayer dollars that are sending the bombs.
Sure, but we killed more people in Yemen with our taxpayer dollars.
To kill Palestinians.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. And that conflict was dramatically undercovered. I mean, something we covered here as well.
Yeah.
But the horror of these images that are coming out, the understanding that we are, not just enabling, but directly complicit in it, the belligerent stance taken by the Biden White House. I mean, you may not have those feelings. It may not resonate with you, but it's very clear that for a lot of people, the sense that we are participating in an ethnic cleansing and a genocide, it's a pretty searing political moment. And
that's right, because it's our money that's aiding it.
So I think that the Biden White House assumption that people are just going to move on and they're not going to care about this in a little while and it's no big deal and the poll numbers are bounced back up, I don't see it.
Maybe. Again, I mean, it's not my job to convince them to vote for Biden or not. I probably want the otherwise. So my whole thing with it would be, I just don't want to overstate whenever at the end of the day, we're not talking about something which is not directly impactful in the way that Iraq was. Now, tensions may be high now, but as you said, like, are they really going to be there a year from now? It's possible that we could have a ceasefire, some sort of hostage release in the interim. People say all kinds of things. So will they really forget that? The most reliable thing that we've seen so far with Democratic voters is abortion and the Trump boogeyman. Both are going to be on the table. I find it very difficult to believe that they're not going to come out and vote against.
Well, I won't be voting for Joe Biden, so there's nothing difficult to think about that. I will not be voting for anyone in the two-party system, regardless if October 7th happened or not. But I want to add to the Bernie Sanders movement because I want to prove a point. One of the things I did critique about Bernie Sanders' campaign is this idea of unity, right? So Bernie Sanders believed that we can all just have this unity and we have these universal programs and that'll bring everybody together. And I'm all for universal programs. But the problem that I had is that it can't stop there. It can't end there. The problem that I had is that when certain segments of the population have other issues that they have to deal with that are not going to be solved by those universal programs, the problem that you run into is that, are those other groups going to be in solidarity with the marginalized groups to fight for the things that they need? And I said it back then and I'll say it again. This was a mistake of the Bernie Sanders campaign. And that's why someone like Sagar can sit there and can say, I mean, I just don't get it. These protests, you're not Palestinian. It was a missed moment, I think, from the Bernie movement, not to inform the people and the masses about what it means to stand with another group. And Bernie Sanders knows this from personal experience because Bernie Sanders was a part of the civil rights movement. So that was a mishap. That was a mishap. When people tried to tell this to Bernie Sanders, no, look, we can talk about universal programs and equality, but we can't forget to talk about equity. And that piece was missing. So this is why, I don't get it. You're not Palestinian. Should we say, I don't get it. Why did you participate in the civil rights movement? I don't get it. You're not Black. Why were you out there fighting for George Floyd? Why were you out there fighting against police brutality? I don't get it. You're not Black. That's the problem with that statement. Now I want to show you the numbers. Since I think Sagar seems to fail to understand, I will show you what the numbers actually look like. We'll look at this ticket here from CM Parker, and I'll show you the casualties from 2008 to 2023. Look at this. So as you can tell, look at who's losing the most people. 2012, 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So you see, look at that. It's very clear what's happening here. That is a huge difference. It's not like, we're looking at over 161. We'll round this up since it's 967 here. So 162,000 people in the Palestinian people, 6,615 Israelis. But our government is telling us that we need to be focused on one of those groups and not the other ones. And I'll say this again. I said it before. I do not stand with an oppressor, period. You can't tell me it's equal because it's not. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. Thank you for the super chat. Stop Ziffing Kids. Oil is on the north side of Gaza. It's about money. LPA Film says Sagar is part of that institute. Forgot the name, and they are very pro-Israel. Plus, I wouldn't be surprised if the circles that he run in has influence. Sagar and Robbie are all bad faith actors. Interesting. Thank you for the super chat, Raphael. But sister, can you formulate a good reason why Russia and China are standing idle, letting this modern day trail of tears happening? Russia, probably because they're already dealing with Ukraine, so there's still that issue. I think they have spoken out against it. China, I don't know. But if they were to intervene, that's the thing. I think if Russia and China were to intervene, that would kick off World War III. Thank you for the super chat, Flower Bro. From the river to the sea, Biden gets no vote from me. I know, right? Spark Joy says alewife. Yes, alewife is another one that they're gentrifying. I forgot about that. Thank you for the super chat, Everton. He and Robbie are exactly the same. I can see this in different ways. Thank you, Mary. The better question to Sagar is how much they slide to him. They are celebrities coming out being paid and giving free trips in place of good talking points in favor of Israel. That's an interesting question. Sparkjoy says, Sabby, you should watch Colonel Larry Wilkerson's interviews. He basically said that Israel is now a liability for the United States. I'll have to check that out. And thank you, None of Your Business. Brothers are saying we are not involved in this mess. It's unfortunate. Let me go ahead and get that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Senior Cynic. I saw the documents that Netanyahu funded Hamas since 1999 to promote chaos in Gaza. That's another thing, too. I didn't get a chance to talk about. Maybe I'll cover that Tuesday. That is another one that I need to go into. And thank you, Karim, for the tip. Sagar is linked to the Hudson Institute, which is linked to the Rand Corp. Thank you for that, Karim. We are now moving into this story with Candace Owens and Norm Finkelstein. So first and foremost, I want to say this. I don't agree with Candace Owens politically on pretty much almost anything. I agree with her in reference to the censorship issue, and I agree with her in reference to U.S. intervention. I don't think the U.S. government should intervene in other countries, get involved in these wars, et cetera, et cetera. Other than that, we don't really agree, right? But I will say this. If you have not seen this interview from Candace Owens with Norm Finkelstein, I think you need to watch this interview because I'm not going to play the full thing on here, obviously, but there's 3 parts I do want to highlight. Not only that, but I highly recommend that you look at the comment section of the video because the comments were wildly favorable towards this discussion. And I'm going to say it like this. I honestly think I feel that this was a chess move made by Candace Owens because Norm Finkelstein has been asking Ben Shapiro to debate him for I don't know how many weeks on Twitter. He's been challenging him to a debate about this issue with Israel and Gaza, and Ben has not been willing to accept the challenge. I wonder why. But Candace Owens was willing to sit down and have the discussion with Norm Finkelstein. So I feel like this is a chess move by Candace Owens towards Ben Shapiro since he wasn't willing to do it. Let's get into it.
To first and foremost, unpack your bio a bit. I think it's great to have you here because you are an academic. And so people immediately kind of use the authoritative argument. You don't know what you're talking about. You're not educated about this. You are incredibly educated. And what brought you to, as a person who was raised by concentration camp survivors, to the pro-Palestinian side?
Well, I don't want to quibble over terminology, but sometimes if the terminology is wrong at the outset, then it confuses things moving forward. I'm not pro-Palestinian. I'm not pro-Israeli. I'm pro-truth, and I'm pro-justice. If the truth is on the Israeli side, I will support Israel. If justice is on the Israeli side, I'll support Israel. And the same thing goes for the Palestinians. I've spent the greater part of my adult life, you can say beginning 1982, so it's more than 4 decades, researching, studying the Israel-Palestine conflict. And it's my conclusion at the end of that research, but already early on, that the case that Israel makes for its crimes are in large part fabrications, misrepresentations, and distortions. And on the other hand, the Palestinian case is very strongly supported by the evidence. And when I speak about evidence, I'm not talking about what Hamas says any more than when I speak about Israel. I care much about what the government says. If you're serious about these sorts of things, the first thing you do is you try to search out sources which have a certain amount of credibility. So when it comes to the Israel-Palestine conflict, let's say the human rights dimension, you look at what respected human rights organizations have to say, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, the B'Tselem, the main Israeli information center for the occupied territories.
And by the way, those organizations have been complaining about the human rights issue in Gaza for years. I think the first time I covered it was 2 years ago. So yeah, just something to keep in mind.
You look at what the evidence shows, not based on biased sources or naturally biased sources, but on the available evidence. And I try to be a strict adherent of the 2 principles of truth and justice. And that's where I landed. And I think that's frankly where most of the world has landed. And it's also, incidentally, but not trivially, it's where a large part of the young Jewish population has landed. If you go to the demonstrations now, the ones that have garnered the headlines, say the one in Grand Central Station, was overwhelmingly Jewish, was organized by Jewish organizations.
That was the one that was organized by Jewish Voices for Peace. That one was huge, right? So I'm so glad that he said this on Candace's show, because some of the rhetoric that's been coming from people like Megyn Kelly and Ben Shapiro, if you just listen to them, and this is to anyone that's watching that's on the right, if you just listen to them, then it's like they will have you believing that the only people that are out there protesting for this issue or have organized the protest are people who are like Hamas lovers, people who are like domestic terrorists, etc. And leaving out this important part that a lot of the larger ones that have been organized by Jewish Voices for Peace.
Young people, mostly, but not entirely. The Statue of Liberty demonstration, again, It was Jewish young people who organized the demonstration. So this idea that it's somehow polarized ethnically is belied by the facts. Now, I will wholeheartedly admit that when I first started out, we were a handful of people, Jews, who opposed what Israel was doing. But the spectrum has radically changed in recent years. I'm just one among a large number, a sea of Jews who oppose what's going on, not because they're self-hating, not because they're indifferent to the fate of Israelis, but because the evidence is overwhelming. And it's impossible. You start out by saying you're not knowledgeable about the topic. Fair enough, there are 10,000 topics I'm not knowledgeable about, and where you have much more knowledge. I'm quite certain of that. But this is not a particularly complicated situation right now. The Israeli government is openly, unabashedly, flagrantly, blatantly, it's declared a war of genocide on the people of Gaza.
I'm so glad again. Like, I know some people are like, oh, it's Candace Owens. Who cares? You know, she's a grifter, yada, yada, or whatever. Look, my thing is this. This gave someone on the left the opportunity to tell people what is happening in reference to the state of Israel and what they've been doing to the Palestinian people, but to explain this to an audience that, for the most part, I would assume is predominantly right-wing, right, or conservative. So this could have been the first time that some of Candace's viewers actually heard this perspective about it. She didn't interrupt him. Like, I saw the entire interview. So she didn't interrupt him, cut him off. She wasn't nasty towards him. She just let him speak. And I sincerely hope, because like I said, I read the comments. The comments are in favor of the interview. I sincerely hope more people, after seeing this interview, they will share it with their friends and with their family members who are on the right and may have had a different position about this issue, so they can hear it from someone like Norm Finkelstein, who is also Jewish, who knows a lot about this issue and has talked about this issue so much to the point that he has actually been, barred from certain spaces because of it.
That's not exaggerated language. The Prime Minister of Israel said in a speech which has been reproduced everywhere, he said, this is a war against Amalek, referring to the Old Testament. And what's a war against Amalek? Well, just open up the Old Testament.
Yep.
It obliges Israel to kill every man, woman, and child. That's what it means to invoke a war against Amalek. Can there be any doubt? Now, I mean this seriously. Can there be any doubt in the minds of any objective observer when Israel declares a policy of prohibiting any food, water, fuel, or electricity from entering Gaza, if that's their declared policy? Now, I know that you're an expectant mother.
Pause here for a second before he gets to the kids part. That piece that he brings up about the food and the water. So when we talk about this idea of the genocide or ethnic cleansing, it's not just in reference to Israel, bombing Gaza. It's also in reference to them preventing food and water to come into the civilians. So let's say you are not killed by a bomb or airstrike. Then you could also die from lack of food or water. Remember, like 90% of the water in Gaza is not clean.
So bear in mind what that means to you. Now, Ms. Owens, I'm not sure if you are aware that 1/2 of the population of Gaza, its total population is 2.3 million, about 1.15 million are children. They're like the child that you have and the child that you are expecting. Now, some people will say, I'm playing on people's emotions. But I do not believe that you as a mother would say it's manipulative, it's demagogic for me to say it is not a complicated question when a country has a declared policy of denying a population food, water, fuel, electricity. That is not complicated. So I won't even allow for the option of saying, well, I'm ignorant, I don't know. Sorry, it doesn't require a lot of knowledge.
Let's pause there, and we're going to go to the second part. The part about the children, I think that's the part that really tugs at a lot of people's heartstrings. The video images that I've seen of the kids, people I know that are not even into politics, they've seen those images and they're like, this is awful. This is awful. Like, I don't see how anyone, unless you're a soulless bastard, I don't see how anyone can look at that and not feel something. And I feel that same way, by the way, when I showed the picture, when we talked about the pictures of the kids that were starving in Afghanistan, when I covered that over a year ago because of the economic sanctions that were implemented by the US government, same thing. I felt the same way. I feel the same way when I see those infomercials that pop on late at night and they said with $1 a month, you can help a starving kid in Africa. I feel the same way because a child is innocent. A child there's no guilt. It's a baby. And it's terrifying to me that people can see images of kids who aren't even old enough yet to know right and wrong and feel absolutely nothing. That is honestly disgusting to me. I don't understand how anyone can sleep with their self at night feeling that way. I do not understand it. Now we're going to go to the second part here where he starts to talk about a little bit about what the audience may be anticipating, where he breaks down this whole part about what's complicated and what's not complicated. Because I don't think it is a complicated situation. I think people are saying that because they don't really want to explain it and they don't want to admit Israel's faults. That's how I feel. The same way history teachers can sit down and explain World War II and World War I and migration, they can explain this. Let's get to this second part here.
Was Hamas's leadership in the basement of Al-Shifa Hospital? Answer, no. Were there hostages beneath Al-Shifa Hospital? Answer, no. You just get the lies and more lies and more lies and more lies. And attendant upon those nonstop lies are the cessation, the termination of life because of the lies. The termination of life of thousands of Palestinian children. Is that complicated? Does it require a PhD in Middle East studies to figure these things out? in my book, at the risk of offending some people in the audience, and maybe that's why I react as I do when I see these things unfold before my eyes. It's as complicated as Jews, like my parents' mother on both sides, father on both sides, sisters and brothers on both sides. It's as complicated as my family, except for my mother and my father, being shoved into gas chambers. That's how complicated it is in my eyes. That government in Israel, in cahoots with our own government, spread the lies about Hamas's command and control center to justify denying the fuel for the incubators. Now, I'll tell you something, Candace. I live in an apartment building. I go into my elevator, and there will be a parent with the kids. And I look at the kids, and like an old man that I am, I say hello to the kids, smile to the kids. And all of a sudden, I get overcome with this sick feeling because I look at the kid and then I see those pictures from Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
I see those incubators. With all due regard to your audience, sorry, not complicated.
So I just want to say in defense of my audience, they are very receptive to conversation. I have built this platform talking about different sides. I mean, I take a lot of contrarian positions, and I think my audience, I'm constantly covering, past CIA operations where the public was lied to. I have, critiqued even our own response and the killing of, 1 million Iraqi civilians over perceived weapons of mass destruction that were never found. So I do just want to say that my audience is not one way or the other. They're very open to conversation, just in defense of my audience. And the second thing I want to say is that I didn't mention your academic credentials at the top of the audience at the top of the show, because I felt that people needed to go, oh, well, he's allowed to say what he's allowed to say. I actually said that to push back against people saying that I wasn't educated and I wasn't allowed to ask questions. And so I'm saying, okay, well, he's educated, he's Jewish. Is he allowed to ask questions and present a different side? Just to let us skip through that process, not to say that.
And I'll add in here too, I honestly get tired of the so-and-so's not educated enough or informed enough, to talk about a topic. This is one of the things that those of us at RBN, this is one of the reasons why RBN started, is because we want people to realize there are different voices that need to be heard from, right? You don't have to have a PhD. I don't have a PhD. I have a master's, but I don't have a PhD. And there are a lot of people in the space that do not have a PhD. Does that mean that they're not as informed, right? No, not necessarily. You can educate yourself in different ways. Doesn't mean you have to do so in reference to different types of degrees. So that's one of the things I've said before is to audience members that I guess may have had a problem with her not talking to someone about this that does not have, I guess, a PhD or whatever, or her talking about it because she doesn't have a PhD. I'm just like, yeah, so what? So what? Sometimes these things are more about lived experiences and not necessarily about what you researched in college.
People require a degree to feel something. I mean, if you know anything about my story, I don't think that. And if you have followed my commentary, I am very struck by the lack of inhumanity that I am seeing from both sides. And I don't understand how people can be so angry at Israelis that when you see a dead Israeli child, you don't feel something. And I do not understand why people need to, as I said yesterday on Tucker's program, button the issue of saying when you see a dead Palestinian child, oh, but it was a human shield. That's not my reaction. I had a very emotional reaction to seeing a dead Palestinian Christian child pull from the rubble, and she looked like my daughter, and I cried. So I am not beyond my humanity here. I don't need a PhD to feel that humanity, and it is why I said that I wanted to make sure that both sides are being represented here. Now, what I do want to ask you is, you talked about mowing the lawn, you said an Israeli government policy. What do you mean by an Israeli government policy? What specifically are you talking about? Because that is something that I am ignorant of, and I would just like you to explain where that comes from.
Okay. Now, I've been accused of going on and on and on and on. So you'll have to at some point say, okay, you explained that enough. Let's move on. The basic picture is this. And I admit everybody has an arbitrary starting point. So people may not agree with my starting point. So let me just give you the very basic picture as I see it. In 2006, our government, it was then President Bush, it was in that period, you might recall, what was called democracy promotion. And one of the instances of democracy promotion was he told the Palestinians to hold an election in the West Bank and Gaza. They hold an election, Hamas wins the election. Okay? Hamas didn't want to participate, ended up being convinced to participate, put up a party, and it won the election. Jimmy Carter, who you know because you're from the South, and former president, he monitored the election, and he said completely honest and fair election. I'm quoting him word for word. Hillary Clinton, she said later, United States made a mistake because it didn't rig the election. That's what she said. The wrong party won. We made a mistake. We should have rigged the election.
And that was just an example of Hillary Clinton, again, advocating for the U.S. intervention abroad, right? It's really not up to us to decide who other countries' leaders should be. That's not a fair democracy. And I really think the U.S. government needs to have their hands out of those matters. So I was glad that he mentioned that as well.
Hamas comes to power. What's the first thing the United States does? What is the first thing Israel does? They impose sanctions on Gaza. Brutal economic sanctions. First of all, before I get to those sanctions and rush to the present, your audience has to know, or should know, and would probably want to know, what is Gaza? Gaza is 25 miles long. For those in your audience who are joggers or runners, Gaza's its length is less than a marathon. Its width is 5 miles. And even in my old age, I jog 5 miles every day. It's not a long distance. Gaza is 5 miles by 25 miles.
So any of you that have been to the Boston Marathon, which I've gone to multiple times, it's that length, if you think about it. It's not that big.
Okay. It's among the most densely populated places on God's earth, more populated than Tokyo. 70% of the people of Gaza, 70%, are refugees. They were expelled from Israel in 1948, and they and their descendants ended up in Gaza. 50% are children. That's Gaza.
Yep.
Among the most densely populated places on God's earth, a tiny parcel of land overwhelmingly composed of refugees and their descendants and children. That's Gaza. So, a brutal blockade is imposed on Gaza in 2006. What does that blockade look like, or what does it mean? It means nobody can go into Gaza and nobody can leave Gaza.
Yep.
With the rarest of exceptions.
What do you mean by that? Sorry, and I'm really sorry for being ignorant.
You should ask.
Yeah,
you should
so
ask.
Hamas,
because people don't understand that.
Yeah, Hamas was voted into power in 2006 by the Gazans.
The parliamentary elections, yes,
right.
Correct.
So if they are the government, what do you mean that despite this, Gazans can't leave or enter that territory?
See, this is the part I think that some people may not have been aware of, right? Like, I mean, this is something I know that Gray Zone has talked about this a lot. Anya is part of the Gray Zone also. Gray Zone's talked about this a lot. Kim Iverson talked about this when she came onto the show, and she's talked about this a lot on her show as well. This is the piece that I think a lot of people are just not aware of, that they do not have freedom of movement. So I think it's important that this piece is discussed as well.
Candace, if you have the time, I appreciate the questions. Because if you don't know, then 95% of Americans don't know.
That's right.
And so we need to go through it. Israel controls the exit and the entry to Gaza. Israel controls the airspace.
Yep.
Israel controls the waterways. Israel controls everything, what goes in. There was a period when Israel denied chocolate, as in bonbons, it's very serious, couldn't go into Gaza. Wouldn't allow baby chicks to go into Gaza. It wouldn't allow potato chips to go into Gaza. There was a period when Israel had an explicit policy of giving Gazans, it was calculated, a starvation plus diet. A diet that just hovered above starvation.
Yep.
It controls everything.
See, this is what people need to hear. People need to hear this. Like, imagine if that was happening to us in the United States, right? Imagine.
In Gaza, there are people with severe medical conditions who want to go to better hospitals in, say, Jordan. They cannot leave. They cannot leave. Gaza is half the population, suffers what international humanitarian organizations call, quote, severe food insecurity, which is to say half the population of Gaza never felt what it was like to have a full stomach.
Now, we talk about poverty in the United States, and we talk about, like, starving kids in the United States and child hunger here in this country. And that is real. That is a real issue. But I do just want to make a comparison for a bit. What's happening to those kids in Gaza and has been happening before October 7th. You want to talk about child poverty and child hunger. It is even more of a severe case in Gaza than it is in the United States. In the United States, at least, we do have some type of programs where if you are, a certain income, your parents are a certain income, then you do qualify for certain programs. Doesn't mean that you're getting a great lavish meal either, but it's more than what kids are given in Gaza. They have no control. They can't even grow. This is another thing Miko Palid talked about. They can't grow their olive trees. They're not allowed to. It's just total control.
You've been to Gaza.
Half the population of Gaza is unemployed. Among youth, it's 70%. Highest unemployment rate of any area in the world. Now, that's the facts, the separate facts.
Have you been to Gaza, Norm?
Yes, I've been to Gaza.
Yeah, I think I read that in your bio. You spent some summers there?
No, I spent summers in the West Bank.
Okay, so not in Gaza, but in the West Bank.
I took two trips, I think, to Gaza. But at my age, I can't even remember how many times I was there. But I think I was there 2 or 3 times. Yeah, 3 times. In any event, if you take all the facts together, what do you get? David Cameron, the former Conservative Prime Minister of the UK, he described Gaza as an open-air prison.
Yep.
One of the senior officials, I would like your audience to listen, plant it in your mind. One of Israel's senior security officials, Giora Eiland, E-I-L-A-N-D, still a very prominent figure in the Israeli security establishment. In 2004, before the blockade, He described Gaza as, quote, a huge concentration camp.
And that's exactly what it looks like if you've seen pictures of it. Anya Parampil actually had a trip to Gaza. She covered this when she was a part of RT, and she was actually outside the gates and talking about what it was about. Like, it really does look like that. I want to get to this last piece of the interview here.
The genocide. First and foremost, what would be the upside if you were the Israeli government to committing a genocide against the Palestinian people? I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Sure.
You see people protesting all around. Why would you think this is something that you're going to get away with if that is in fact the goal, with everybody watching?
Okay. If you allow me, there are two separate questions. The first question is whether it's a genocide. And as I said, at the risk of boring the audience, if you deny food, water, electricity, and fuel, it's a genocide. That to me is a no-brainer. However, there is the question that you just raised, a perfectly reasonable question. And the reasonable question is, why? Is it something in the Israeli DNA? No, I don't think so. Because Gaza for them, for Israel, has always been a problem. Because they refuse, if I can put it this way, they refuse to just languish and die in a concentration camp. They refuse.
Yep.
And so periodically, you know the famous expression, wherever there's oppression, there's resistance. So periodically, there is resistance, and Israel mows the lawn. But after October 7th, it decided, number one, this was obviously a resistance of a much higher magnitude, what happened on October 7th. And also, it was an opportunity. It was an opportunity to solve the Gaza question.
Yep.
Now, during the first week, and we're not talking about ancient history now, we're talking about 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. During the first week, they were hoping to expel all the Palestinians to Egypt, an ethnic cleansing, just clean out Gaza. That was the goal. It didn't work because the head of state of Egypt says, no, Gaza is your problem, not ours. You're not going to put all these people in the Sinai desert, and it's going to become our problem.
Yep.
So that option was no longer available. With that option no longer available, how do you solve the Gaza question? You destroy Gaza. You make it uninhabitable. You turn it into a howling wilderness. And you kill off as many people as you can get away with, given international public opinion, which always acts as a constraint.
And there are different ways that they can do this. Again, like I mentioned before, the water is toxic. The majority of the water was dirty before October 7th, but now it's even worse because there's all this waste that's backing up into the water. I've seen videos of those as well since October 7th. So that's another thing that people do have to understand. There are different ways that they can cleanse the area. One is to push the people into Egypt, which obviously did not happen. The second one is to make it so uninhabitable for you to live there that you're going to die from other things, illness, right? Disease, that type of thing. And it's interesting because when you think about like environmental pollution, purposeful environmental pollution in the United States, this reminds me of places of Flint, Michigan and Jackson, Mississippi, where our government just basically was like, let's just give these people dirty water. And, you know, it's like, do you guys know that like, if you don't have clean water, you know what kind of diseases that can actually cause? Like, for example, cholera. Cholera actually resurfaced in Haiti because of this reason, not having clean water. So it can cause a catastrophe. So if they're not killed by the bombing, by the war, they can die from disease because Israel has found a way to make it so inhabitable.
And you have to acknowledge that Israel has been quite successful. Do you know that more children have been killed in Gaza in the past 5 weeks or 6 weeks. More children have been killed than in every other war zone in the world combined in the years 2020, 2021, and 2022.
Okay, so I had somebody, Dave Rubin, actually, when I just made the blanket statement that genocide is any aspirations or dehumanizing talk is always wrong, again, in reference to Brian Mast's speech in Congress.
She's going to get to the part about Dave Rubin, but really quick, if you guys have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. Thank you. That helps me with the algo. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. Thank you. Let's get to the Dave Rubin part, and then we'll wrap there.
And he pushed back on this, thinking that I was talking about the Israeli government. I wasn't, but he did share a chart in which he showed that, since Israel has been its own sovereign nation, that the Palestinian population has grown. And I think his intent in sharing that was to say, well, if they were trying to commit a genocide, why would they allow the population to grow? So, and I don't have the exact numbers available to me. I'll try to splice this in after so people can see it. What do you say to that?
Israel's policy, as I said, it was a concentration camp, not unlike, for example, the Japanese during World War II. We called them internment camps. It was a concentration camp. As I said, Israel had a policy of a very controlled diet, a starvation plus diet. However, we have to acknowledge something seriously different happened after October 7th in terms of the avowed Israeli intention. Up until October 7th, the Israeli intention was to just keep these people confined in the concentration camp and leave them there to languish and die. But after October 7th, if you look at the avowed aims, it's clear that now they believe that they have a pretext, or at least they believed on October 7th. They now had a pretext and an opportunity because of the leeway given them by the European and American international community. They now had a pretext and an opportunity to solve the question altogether.
That's right. So, guys, if you have not seen the full interview, please go do so. Again, it is on Candace Owens' podcast. I believe this is also on Norm Finkelstein's channel as well. He does have a YouTube channel, and it's called Israel versus Palestine with Norm Finkelstein. Very, very educational things said there if you have not heard. I do want to go ahead and, because I do have a hard stop, I want to go ahead and jump into this story with Michael Rapaport, and then I'll finish with the super chats if you guys don't mind. Michael Rapaport. Many of you may be familiar with him. He's an actor, although I haven't seen him star in anything new recently, but you know, he was kind of like the white guy from New York that kind of had like black friends in hip hop, right? So that's where some people know him from. Some people remember from the movie Higher Learning, etc. But anyway, Michael Rapaport has become a big nuisance also in reference to this issue. He did speak at the March for Israel in DC, but he's just been losing it, particularly on Twitter and TikTok, and he's getting on a lot of people's nerves. So I want to show you his speech here first from the March for Israel, and then we'll go into some of the things that he said. Oh dear, on Twitter.
38 days ago, Israel was attacked. We know what happened. The hostages must come home. Free every single one of them. There cannot be a ceasefire until the hostages are home. I have never felt this prideful to be Jewish in my life. It's been a crazy time, but Jewish people around the world, we have seen it all. We have heard it all. Israel is not going anywhere. And to the people that aren't with us, you're going to thank us later. All you young people in the front, you are beautiful. You're beautiful. Stay strong, all right? Stay safe, stay sane, and make sure you stay disruptive.
Yeah, so obviously I covered that march before, but that march did not have the same impact or effect as the pro-Palestinian marches. It's very clear that the American people, actually across the world, people are not buying the mainstream media narrative about this, and that really frustrates someone like Michael Rapaport. Shout out to Danny Haifong. What's up? He said he's talentless, LMAO. Yeah, so then he made this comment. He tried to make the comparison to Black people. And I think this is where some people really, really were upset with Michael, because Michael, you stepped in it. He said if 10 Black people from America were taken hostage in Gaza by Hamas, the entire world would be on the same page, period. Really, Michael? Listen to what he says.
Yo, if 20 American tourists, 20 American tourists, forget the 1,200 people that were murdered, slaughtered, civilians. If 20 American civilians, all African American, all Black, all ages, were taken hostage, and 10 of them were murdered and raped, and there was 10 surviving American tourist hostages that were all Black, there's not one motherfucker in this country that would be talking about ceasefire.
Let me pause here for a second. Actually, Michael, when Black people are missing or disappear, most of the time it's either not covered by mainstream media or it's covered very quickly within under a minute, and you never hear about it again. This goes back to the missing Black children in Atlanta years ago, missing Black teenage girls in Washington, D.C. So actually, no, typically when Black people disappear, that is actually not the response. But see, this is what happens with people. Because see, Michael, Michael, he thinks that because he has a couple of Black friends in the hip hop industry and like the music industry, he thinks he's like, I'm cool with Black people. So, at some point or another, somebody told him that he was invited to the cookout. I don't think that should have happened because Michael has lost his shit. He's all over. You guys have got to see this on Twitter if you've not seen his videos. But he got the cookout invite. So he feels very comfortable saying some of the things he's saying. But the reality is, that would not happen. Most people wouldn't cover it. Most people who do cover it, the majority of people wouldn't even care, Michael. That's the thing. Let him continue. This is just one of the videos.
There's not one person. It would be bring the fucking hostages back, and they better be alive. They better be pristine.
This is actually not the best example either in reference to the hostage situation, because people don't take us hostage. Other countries don't take Black people hostage because they know that this country would not bargain to get them back. Now, some people brought up the situation in reference to Brittany Griner. Brittany Griner was arrested for carrying an illegal substance, CBD oil, whatever, into Russia, which you cannot bring into Russia. That's a different situation. She wasn't taken hostage. And they worked to get her back. She was also a professional athlete. Keep that in mind. But what I'm saying is this. We're not taken hostage for a reason. We're not kidnapped for a reason. They know that our country is not going to come and fight for us and try to find us. Bingo.
There wouldn't be no ceasefire. There would be no round. Can you imagine college students ripping down posters of 10 black people from America?
We wouldn't even have a poster. We wouldn't have a poster. When black people are missing, there's no poster. Mikey? Okay.
If they were taken hostage and 10 others were raped and murdered, nobody would be saying shit. The African American community would be demanding they came back. White people, black people, Jewish people would be demanding they come back. There wouldn't be
and this is another one I have to debunk. Actually, the black community wasn't even in agreement in reference to the Brittany Griner situation. Just letting you know that as a black person, let Michael try to tell it, but I'm just letting you know there was not a consensus across the board among the black community in reference to Brittany Griner. And I seem to remember some of the other professional athletes, black professional athletes, were totally silent on that issue, did not come for Brittany Griner's defense. So it's just, again, he thinks he know it though, because somebody told him he could come to the cookout.
a discussion of a ceasefire. That's a fact. Nobody can tell me shit that is not a fucking fact. Forget the 1,200 other people that were murdered. I'm talking about just 10.
I can tell you, Michael, Michael has lost it. I don't know how old Michael is now, but Michael has lost it. He feels that no one can tell him that wouldn't be a fact. He's just wrong on so many levels.
I don't compare tragedies, 9/11 versus the Oklahoma City bombing versus this, that, and the third. If it was just 10 African American people, they would be demanding, everybody would be demanding, get them back, get them back, get them back. The word ceasefire wouldn't be in the vernacular. It'd be like, ravage the fucking place until they come back, and they better come back safe and sound.
They didn't even want to do anything in reference to George Floyd, Michael. All the protests that we had in this country across the world, and the demand was, not ceasefire, excuse me. He's got me saying that now. And the demand was at that point in time, Eric, I can't come out of the screen. Can you come out of it for me? The demand was at that point in time was to defund the police. And even for people who didn't agree with defund the police, the point that I'm trying to make when it came to the George Floyd situation, they didn't give us anything. I mean, now it gets crazier. The same guy who ranted for years about how he could not stand President Trump, now he's going on to say now he might vote for Trump. This guy is all over the place.
There's been other things too. There's other times where I'm sure for Dick Stain, Donald Trump, who I had conversations with, I might vote for that motherfucker. Oh yeah, I'll break your hearts. Let me tell you something. Things don't get straightened up in this fucking world ASAP. And I know Smoking Joe has said the right thing about Israel. But when I'm seeing motherfuckers in New York City climb in public in front of crowds of people, rip down UN flags, rip down Israeli flags, rip down American flags on Veterans Day, when the economy is the way the economy is, when I'm paying fucking mortgage rates up, I'm getting, forget a colonoscopy.
Aren't you okay, so here is another Hollywood actor complaining about paying for things. You're a lot better off than a lot of us, Michael. Okay, he's a lot better off than a lot of us. Very interesting.
You don't need to get a colonoscopy. Go buy a house. The interest rates. Go buy a car. And I know Smoking Joe has done some things I know. But I'm telling you right now, go buy yourself. Go check what it's like to buy a car. Buy a house. The money.
The average American can't afford to buy a house. See, that's the thing. This goes to show the disconnect between him and the average everyday people. How many people in New York can afford to buy a home? Not even New York City. I'll be generous. Let's say the New York City suburbs or northern New Jersey. How many people that live in New York City can afford to actually buy a house? Michael looks like he's hurting. He looked like he in pain or something.
The fucking chaos in this country, the chaos around the world. But I'm too far down the Gringo Mandingo. I'm too far down the disruptive warrior rabbit hole to pull back now. The comments have been made, I said. I've had conversations with some of my... If it comes down to pig dick Donald Trump and smoking Joe Biden, I'm sorry. I am sorry. Voting for pig dick Donald Trump is on the table. I'm sorry. I'm fucking sorry. I'll still call him slob dick Donald Trump, pig dick Donald Trump, and all that. But we need to...
So now, Michael, you guys see what's happening here? The same guy who attacked Donald Trump relentlessly when Donald Trump was president. Now it's okay for him to say he's going to vote for Donald Trump. This is why people don't take Michael Rapaport seriously, because he makes a clown of himself. What a mess.
To get this whole fucking situation under control.
And then there's one final. Oh, that was the last one. Okay. Yeah. So, Michael, if you go to Michael's page, it's a mess. If you go to his page, it's kind of funny.
Who I had conversations with, I might vote.
He's still talking. If you go to his page, it's funny. There's a picture of him and it's like his face on someone else's body or whatever, and a mullet. But it's just like I guess they removed that. I'm sorry. He's just been on a rampage. Like, what the fuck? Like, let's see what else he posted recently. I just wanted to see. Oh, there's Kyrie Irving. Oh, he's going to be mad at that one. But it's just, look at him. He's just not having a good day. I think he's painful, right? Look at him. What did he say?
Sadness, this anxiety and this dread overwhelm you. Draw strength from your family, from your friends, from your ancestors, and the worldwide bond that we share that has always put the battery in your back. We're used to being looked at as different because that's what we are. We are different, and that's a good thing. I know that Jews are looked at as weak, but we're stronger than you can imagine. That's why you hurl propaganda bullshit that we control all the money, we control the media, because it's plausible. It's plausible because we're just that good. Smart, compassionate, moral, and strong people. And we need to stand taller than ever against all those sick, dumb, uneducated, black tar in their blood fucks who hate Jews because they ain't. You hate us because you ain't us.
You know what's interesting, though, that more people are starting to point out is that he played a skinhead. That's starting to circle around on Twitter, that he played a skinhead in the movie Higher Learning.
Always been hurled our way. Hate, prejudice has always been hurled our way. And a lot of times we deal with it with compassion or the understanding that it might be mental illness. Fuck that. Never again, you fucks. Anyone saying to me, be on the right side of history, knowing what side I'm on, means you're on the wrong side of history, which means you're on the side of terrorists, murderers, rapists who would burn and behead you and your family. They would love to burn and behead you and your family. There's only right or wrong right now. You either support a caring community or you support extremist exterminators.
It sounded like he said a Karen community. I think he was trying to say caring, but it sounded like he said a Karen community. Ay, ay, ay. What a doozy. Yes, you heard that right. He said black tar. I don't know what that. He's lost it. He's on a rampage. Let's go to some of the comments. Thank you for the super chat, Frank. Sagar was in Israel, him and Robbie, so their mind is made up. Interesting. Bebel says, Norm said not many big left YouTube sites have been hosting him. That's interesting. Black Magic said, as Sabby said, this was a chess move and Candace played it well. Shout out to Buckeye for the super chat. The only good thing that Rapaport did recently was the A Tribe Called Quest documentary. And even some of that was questionable with the rollout. Thank you, Mary. Sabby, in reference to the killing of children, we see babies. IDF see future soldiers, period. That is so sad. Thank you. Stop sniffing kids, Joe. People like Netanyahu and Nikki Haley have no soul. Nikki like money. Thank you for the super chat, Spark Joy, or thank you for the comment, Spark Joy. I work at a university and am surrounded by PhDs, and lots of them are morons and have zero street smarts. Deneen says, did she get Ben Shapiro's approval for this interview or did she go rogue? That's interesting. Thank you, Frank. I think this is really touching, Candace. And thank you, Worskill. He's allegedly gonna fight Rome. LOL. Oh, Michael Rapaport. Oh, I haven't been on Twitter in a couple of hours. I have to check that. Rome probably went after him. And thank you for the super chat, Penny. Benny Hinn, CUFI preaches Hitler did a favor. Yeah, I've heard. It's terrible. I'll take the comment on Rockfin and then we'll head out. Rock and roll. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin Roger. This by far was the funniest response to this asshole, still laughing to this very day. Yes, Sab, we have no value or power. Also, the most important thing Norm said you didn't show was if we are going to talk about releasing hostages, then let's include the 2.3 million Palestinians held in an open air concentration camp. Yes. Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. I can put that up, Eric, if you want me to. Want me to put it up? Okay. And thank you for this tip, Roger. Rapaport standing with the average man. Yeah, I think Eric just grabbed this. So I'll go ahead and put this up on the screen. Michael Rapaport net worth $8 million. Boo-hoo. Boo-hoo, Michael. Oh, I feel so sorry for you. You guys know what it's like to pay a fucking mortgage. You know what it's like? How much it's going to cost to buy this car? Let me stop. Oh, no. $8 million, Michael. $8 million. Jesus Christ. And shout out to 100% Black Roke for being a member for 3 months, says Sappy. Thanks for the time. Thank you. All right, guys, that's it. I'm heading out. Hope you got a couple of laughs there at the end. But yes, $8 million. He's all right. He is all right. All right, guys, you know how we do this. I am off on Monday. I'll be back Tuesday. Until then, have a good night. Keep up the fight.